So here is my exact process that I follow for editing GoPro RAW time lapses from start to finish. The first step you want to take is you want to import those raw.gpr files to your computer, and you want to put them all together in a folder. The next step you want to take is you want to import them into the photo editing software that you're going to use. In my case, I'm going to use Adobe Lightroom Classic. However, there are several photo editing softwares out there that will allow you to do these edits I'm doing today. The biggest key to this process is being able to synchronize the settings you make to one photo to all of the photos. So I've found my photos here and I'm going to click import. And I have 1,724 photos for this time lapse. This was one I captured during the day. It was kind of an overcast day, but then the sun came out later on and it ended up being a pretty good sunset. And by the way, these are raw photos. What you see here is just our starting point. There is a ton of detail available in this photo, and I'm going to show you how to bring it out. All right, so I'm going to pick photo 1002, and I'm going to see if that has what I want. That looks like it is beyond the peak of the sunset, so we're going to go back just a little bit. And I'm going to pick photo 950. Now, it's not super critical you get that precise moment that you believe is the peak, but you want to get around there, and I'll show you why in a moment. So once we've selected our photo, we're going to go here to develop. And what we want to do with develop is we want to make sure these are both turned on right here. So what these are going to do, these triangles right here, these are going to show the shadow clipping and the highlight clipping. So we don't want any shadows that are clipping below 0, which in that case, they would be completely black. There would be no detail there. But we also don't want any highlights that are clipping above 100. So in this current image, there's a little bit of clipping that's below 0 right here in these trees. And then there's a little bit of clipping in the sky that's above 100. So what we want to start off doing is we want to start off by bringing the highlights down just a little bit until that red disappears from the sky. So right there, the red is gone. Next thing we want to do is we want to start bringing our shadows up. We want to wait until that black disappears completely from the trees. So we get to about right there. And if we get all the way to 100, there's just a little bit still remaining in the trees. But if you look at that, we have brought out a ton of detail in this that was available in those shadows. Our starting point, to be clear, was right here. And we just got those shadows all the way up to there. And I actually like how that looks in this time lapse. Now, if you want to keep your shadows a little bit darker, back off a little bit on that if you want to, that's fine. But in this case, I want to take advantage of all of that detail that I can get. After we bring up the shadows completely, there's still a little bit of red in the highlight. So we're going to bring the highlights down just a little bit further. But we don't want to bring the highlights down more than we need to, because we want to have that contrast of the brightness in the sky with some darkness on the ground here. After we've done that, what we want to do is we want to go down here and we want to bring up the vibrance. So we can bring up saturation, but if you bring up the saturation too much, it's going to look really bad. But when you bring up vibrance, it's a much more subtle effect. Like right there, I've brought it up about 40, and that has brought out some nice additional colors, but it's not overdone. We want subtle here. Subtle is going to give us a really good looking time lapse. So with vibrance, I'm going to go up just a little bit more here. I'm going to go to about 45, and I like that right there. Right there at 45, the colors look natural because this image is starting off very flat. So after we've done that, we want to go down here and we want to make sure we like all of our hues. So currently, I'm pretty happy with the hues, the yellow, green in the grass and the trees. That's pretty true to what it looked like. And then these colors up in the sky, those are also pretty true to what they look like. But if you do feel like any of your hues are off, you can drag this left or right, and you can play around with those. But you want to be really careful with the hues. Just a little bit is going to be all you want to do. You don't want to do any major adjustments or it's going to look really bad. And then the same thing with saturation. If you click here for saturation, if there's any colors you want to emphasize a little bit more, let's say we wanted to emphasize orange a little bit more, we can do that. Or if for some reason we wanted green emphasized a little bit less in the foreground with the grass and the trees, we can do that there. We can back off on the green and the yellow. and it's going to make it much more muted there. So play around with it as you want it to look for your time lapse. I'm going to keep these at their defaults for now. One thing I like to do here that make your photos look a little bit more professional for your time lapse and give it a little more of a cinematic feel is here on the color grading. I like to adjust the shadows slightly cool toward the blue, and we want to go very slightly. So this is our starting point, but if we take the shadows right about there, it's a very subtle effect, but I love how it looks. And then what we want to do here for our highlights is we want to take them slightly in the orange direction. What that does is it gives us a little bit of that orange-blue contrast, and that has a really nice feel to it, especially with sunsets. And then after we make those adjustments, you want to click Remove Chromatic Aberration. If you don't see that option in your photo editing software, that's not a big deal. But if you do have it there, select it. And then enable Profile Correction. That's going to help remove some of this fisheye that we see here. Now, unfortunately, Lightroom Classic does not yet have the profile for the Mission 1 Pro here. It goes up to the Hero 13 Black. But if we use the 13 Black as a starting point, what we can do is we can take the distortion down to right about 50. And it does a nice job correcting that. And right around 50 for the Mission 1 Pro looks very natural. We don't have that weird distortion when it's correcting the fisheye, so I like how that looks right there. But if you don't have the lens profile in your photo editing software, you can play around with the distortion to get it as you want it to be. So after we do that, we want to go up here and we want to do a final check. So right now there's still a little bit of overexposure in our sky, so we want to bring the highlights down just a little bit further. And then the shadows, we've already brought them up to 100, so we are good there. And the only other thing you might want to do after looking at this is you might want to add a little bit of dehaze effect. I'm going to bring that up just a little bit here. It's going to especially help with the details in the sky, and it's going to also add some additional contrast. Now, you don't want to do that. That's way overdone. Looks like a cool painting though. I like how that looks, but with the dehaze, this is our starting point, and I recommend coming up to about 10 on this. That looks really good right there. But when I add that dehaze, we still have a little bit of overexposure in our highlights, so we're going to back off just a little bit more there. And we're going to go with that right there. So after you've done all of that, we're going to do Control A, and we're going to right click on the photo we made all of these changes to. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to Develop Settings, and we're going to go to Sync Settings. And what we're going to do is we're going to select Check All, but then one thing you want to deselect is white balance. Because when I shot this time lapse, if you've seen my time lapse best settings video, I recommend keeping white balance set to auto, because especially for a sunset, the white balance is going to be changing throughout the sunset. So you want to deselect that because you don't want to sync the same white balance to all the photos or it's not going to look good. But what you want to do after unchecking that and making sure all of these are selected, you're going to go to Synchronize. And it's going to quickly synchronize these settings to all of the photos. So after you've done that, what you want to do is you want to go back here to the beginning and you want to look at photo number 1 in your time lapse. You want to make sure we're starting at a good point here and that everything looks good with the start of the time lapse. So that is photo 1 there. Love how that looks. So we're going to skip ahead a couple hundred photos. Let's check in around photo 335, just make sure things are still looking good there. They are, they're looking great. So let's check in down here around 750. We're going to click that. 750 looks great. Nice and smooth gradient, by the way. That's going to flow really nicely for our time lapse. And then let's go down here and let's check in as we get toward the end. So let's check 1339. So 1339 also looks great. This is obviously after the sun has set and we're starting to fade to darkness. So we're going to go over here a little bit more. We're going to look at 1536. And by the way, if you just want to see how it looks without the shadow and highlight clipping on, you can just uncheck that box there. Uncheck that triangle. It's going to show you that. But yeah, everything looks great here. I'm very happy with it. So what we can do at that point is we want to make sure all of our photos are selected. They are. And what we want to do is we want to right click and we want to go to Export. And then we want to select Export right up here. And then I like to do Export to same folder as original photo, but I like to put all of these in a subfolder named export. And then down here for the image format, I like to select JPEG. I like to put the quality to 100, and then I like to select the sRGB, IEC, and then all of those numbers right there for the color space. I find that this translates best to uploading a time-lapse to YouTube or other social media. After you've selected that, you can select export, and it's going to proceed to export all of these files. So depending on how many you have, the specs on your computer and what software you're using will depend on how long this takes. I have found that with about 1,700 of these raw photos, the export time takes about 10 minutes on my MacBook Pro. But again, your results are going to vary depending on the specs of your computer. So I'm going to pause a moment, and we're going to come back to this as soon as this is done exporting, because I'm going to show you how to import these individual files into your video editor and then create your finished product time-lapse. Our photos have finished exporting from Lightroom. So what we want to do now is we want to go to Premiere Pro. And again, this doesn't have to be Premiere Pro. You can use Final Cut, DaVinci Resolve, or other video editing software. The key is that you can import images in a sequence so those images can be converted into a video time-lapse. So your video editor needs to do that. And if you haven't done it before with the video editing software that you use, I recommend looking it up to see how to do it. But in Premiere Pro, what we want to do first is we want to make a new sequence, and we want to go to settings here and make sure your time base is 23.976 if you want 24 frames per second. If you want 30 frames per second, make sure to select 29.97. And for the frame size, we want to have 3840 by 2160. This is 4K. And then the rest of these settings we can leave alone. And I'm going to hit OK. And then what we want to do here is we want to import our photos. And what we're going to do is we're first of all going to make sure these are in order sequentially from the lowest file number to the highest. So in this case, they're backwards. So we're going to click name, and we can see here it's starting with 3279. So we want to click on the first one. We want to go to show options, and we want to select image sequence. In Premiere Pro, when we do that and click import, it's going to import these files sequentially in a row. So we're going to take this and we're going to drop it on our timeline. And it's going to tell us this is a clip mismatch. And the reason for that is A, these were shot in 4:3, so they're not going to match the 16:9. And B, the resolution of these is much higher than 4K. It's 8K. So we're going to select keep existing settings, and it's going to be way zoomed in. So what we want to do is we want to right click on this, and we want to select fit to frame. When we do that, it's going to have some black on the edges. So what we need to do is we need to increase the scale. So we're going to drag this until we get to 47 is going to be what we want. That's going to fill out the sides there, and there's not going to be any black. But the nice thing is what this also allows us to do is vertically, we have a lot of extra to work with here. What you can do here to add motion, and what I like to do with time lapses like this where it's approaching a sunset, I like to drag this down here to about 750. I like to add keyframes right there. And then I'm going to drag this all the way to the end, to our very final frame, which is going to be a fade to complete darkness. We're going to go back one to make sure we're on that. And we're going to add keyframes again, but then we're going to drag this way up. So we're going to have our blue box around this here to make sure we're not going beyond the vertical extent at the top. So I'm going to go to about 1400 right here. And so once we've got it adjusted here, we want to play through it. We just want to make sure everything looks good. And you may find that if you don't render it, it might skip and lag a little bit on you. That's fine. Your final output's not going to look like that after you export it. But we just want to look through it here, and we want to make sure everything looks good and that we're happy with it. Now, obviously, this is a standalone project at the default speed, but if you want to speed it up at all, you can do that as well. So if you want to show the passage of time while telling your story and you want it to be like 5 seconds long, something like that, that's really easy to do. You're just going to right click here and you're going to go to speed duration, and we're going to speed it up. So if I do 1000 here instead of 100, that's going to make it 7 seconds instead of 1 minute and 11 seconds. So we'll go to that, and everything's just going to go a lot faster right there. So play around with the speed, get it as you like it. And then at that point, what we want to do is we want to go up here and we want to export it. So we're going to go to File, Export, Media. And one of the keys to getting a great time lapse is having the right export settings. So what we want to do here is we want to first of all select Match Source, Adaptive High Bitrate. And then under Video, you can click Match Source, and then down here under More, you want to make sure to select Render at Maximum Depth and use Maximum Render Quality. And then down here under Profile, you want to uncheck that and you want to select High. And then for Level, you want to uncheck that and you want to select 5.2. And then after you've done that, one more setting you want to change down here under Bitrate Encoding where it says VBR 1 pass, you want to change this to CBR. CBR stands for Constant Bitrate. You don't want your bitrate to be changing during your time lapse. You want it to stay constant. That way, when it gets compressed on YouTube, it's not going to dip low and give you compression artifacts. And for the target bitrate, I like to do 100 megabits per second. That gives a really high quality video and it looks good on YouTube, but it is going to make a fairly sizable file. So if you don't want that large of a file size, you can back off a little bit here, but I would not go any lower than 60. So once you've put in all those settings, I'm going to go back to 100 here. You're going to select Export, and it's going to proceed to export your time lapse. Now I want to show you the file to see how it looks. Looks really nice. Nice and smooth, beautiful sunset, nice fade to darkness. There's none of that skipping there when it fades to darkness. Love how it looks. And if you'd like to learn more about how to capture the very best time lapses, the best footage, and so much more with the GoPro Mission 1, check out this playlist right here.